Welcome back to Inside Games, the only show brave enough to unironically enjoy Cyberpunk 2077.
It's so true. In a world filled with people mad about video games, we have the singular courage to play video games and have fun with them.
Quick note to all the viewers out there, since we do enjoy Cyberpunk, we are free this weekend. If you guys want to schedule a parade or something, let us know if you do those so we can get our sequence jackets out, dry clean, do the whole deal.
Unfortunately, Sony won't be invited to the Bravery Parade this time around because apparently they're the ones sandbagging Cyberpunk 2077's return to the PlayStation Store.
So the game hasn't been available digitally for PlayStation platforms since last December when Sony yanked it off the store.
Yeah, and as days go by and Cyberpunk gets patched, it only becomes more and more strange that the game has yet to be relisted in any way.
CD Projekt themselves seem just as confused as everyone else at this point, based on a recent statement from CDPR CEO Adam Kaczynski to investors.
Ooh, that sounds interesting, but first, I have to make my expected humble brag / disclosure here. This is actually important. So, I think out of everyone on the planet, I'm probably the last person that should be talking about any of this, because I am materially and directly linked to this. So my partner works for CD Projekt, and CD Projekt employees get a bonus pool based on the revenue that the company makes. So, very direct, well, not directly, not into my accounts, but I do stand to materially gain if CD Projekt makes money. So that's something worth knowing whenever words come out of my mouth about this. I give that information to you.
Tell you what, though, I have no connection at all. So I just like the video game. Sorry, everybody. When asked about the status of the game and the PlayStation Store, Adam Kaczynski said via a translator that he had, quote, no new information in this regard. We are still in discussions, and with every patch, the game gets better and there is visible progress. But as we said, the decision is an exclusive decision of Sony, so we are waiting for the information about the fact that they took the decision to bring back this game. Until then, I am not able to tell you anything more.
SVP of Business Development Mikhail Novakovsky mentioned during the call that the delisting of Cyberpunk on the PlayStation Store has, shocker, likely affected the overall sales of the game across all platforms, but would expect sales to go back up with the game's return to PSN, as well as the upcoming next-gen update for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and Series X, expected to release sometime later this year.
Yeah, he finished his remark by saying, quote, obviously Sony's decision is much awaited by many gamers, and we believe it may also influence purchasing decisions of not only those playing on PlayStation, but also on other platforms. So this is important to us.
Yeah, I'll bet it is.
So what's going on here, Lawrence? It's been over 150 days since the game came out. Why would Sony sandbag this?
So yeah, it's in this case, I guess we can only come up with two pretty likely explanations here. Either the game is still too broken for Sony to allow people to play it, or maybe Sony's just being spiteful.
The most obvious answer is the former. Everyone on the internet agreed it was unplayable trash. So surely it must be. And brave Sony's out here protecting the poor gamers from unplayable trash.
Circumstantial evidence, and it is all circumstantial, let's be honest about that, suggests this really isn't about quality concerns anymore, and maybe just a power demonstration for Sony?
But to understand why Sony may be pissed off about it, we need to look at what happened when it launched.
Yeah, and even though we're admitted Cyberpunk hyper shills, it's not pretty. There's no getting around that one.
The game had tons of hype and excitement behind it, racking up 8 million pre-orders before it even launched.
But then it had the misfortune of actually launching. Poor performance on base PS4 and Xbox One consoles led to memeable glitches that made it the laughingstock of the internet. Not to mention, it really had no chance of living up to people's expectations in the first place, which is, something you could blame CDPR for. It gets messy at that regard.
As you'd expect when a game runs like ass, people started asking for their money back. And word started getting around that some refunds, even ones that technically shouldn't be honored according to store policy, were being given out.
Yeah, and it was chaotic. So this is still around like 3 days after Cyberpunk's launch. Gaming news outlets are starting to report on this phenomenon. And then CD Projekt takes to Twitter. They announced that, quote, if you're not pleased with the game on your console and don't want to wait for updates, you can opt to refund your copy.
Yeah, the process sounded easy, asking you to, quote, please use the refund system of PSN or Xbox respectively for digital games, while physical owners should, quote, first try to get a refund at the store where you bought the game. They then listed an email address to contact if either of those didn't work.
But a day later, people on the internet, they're kind of posting examples, specific PlayStation users were posting examples saying that their refunds were being denied.
The issue seemed to be that Cyberpunk refunds fell outside of PlayStation's existing refund policy. So according to PlayStation.com, quote, after purchasing content through PlayStation Store, you have 14 days from purchase to request a refund. If you've started to download or stream the purchased content, you will not be eligible for a refund unless the content is faulty.
But according to some, they were denied a refund because they'd installed the game. even though CD Projekt is over here saying that it should work. Just ask for a refund and you're fine. So yeah, they announced refunds only 3 days after launching the game, and other companies are kind of acting like they haven't really been told about it. It all creates the impression or the observation that CDPR didn't really coordinate with anyone before hip-firing a refund promise out onto the internet.
So back to that SVP of Business Development, Mikhail Novakovsky, during an investor call, went into more detail regarding refunds and didn't bring any implication that Sony and Microsoft were looped in on their plan.
It's an interesting explanation here. Quote, Microsoft and Sony have refund policies for every product that is released digitally on their storefronts. Despite several articles I've seen that things are being set up just for us, it's actually not true. These policies are in place and have always been in place. They're not offered specifically for us. Anyone who has purchased any title on the PlayStation Network or the Microsoft storefront can ask for a refund, and if it's made within certain boundaries, usually related to time, usage, and so on, can ask for that refund. Our procedure here with Microsoft and Sony is not different than with any other title released on any of those storefronts. I want to state that clearly, as there seem to be certain misconceptions.
Bear in mind, CDPR also didn't announce a refund program in conjunction with either PlayStation or Microsoft. Neither company even acknowledged the situation until 5 days later.
Yeah, on December 17th, a week after Cyberpunk's launch and 4 days after CDPR told everyone they could get refunds, Sony finally affirmed that they would offer full refunds to everyone that purchased Cyberpunk 2077.
But they went one step further. On the Cyberpunk 2077 refund page, Sony stated that, quote, SIE will be removing Cyberpunk 2077 from PlayStation Store until further notice. No real reason given, although if the game's so broken that they need to issue refunds, the reason should be obvious.
Or is it? That actually might be the wrong assumption, specifically relating Cyberpunk's state to its refund and also its denial in the store. But we'll get back to that later.
Yeah, a day after Sony's announcement, CD Projekt Red issues a statement on Twitter acknowledging an arrangement with Sony.
Xbox responded later the same day, making the same commitment for Xbox players who also wanted refunds. Only they conspicuously didn't yank the game out of their store.
And that was it. The world kept spinning. Cyberpunk stayed off the PlayStation Store 4 months.
Understandably, the topic did come up during the CD Projekt investor call back in March, where SVP of Business Development, Mikhail Novakovsky, directly said that, quote, the final decision you have to understand belongs to Sony. We do believe we're closer than further, but of course the final call is theirs, so let's wait and see.
2 months later, and the answer is still the same. The game continues to improve, but Sony makes the call when it returns.
So what's the deal? Why is Sony's not making the call, so why are they holding the game back?
Lawrence, duh, it's hot trash.
Everyone loves bagging on this game, so, we're going to try our best to look at the performance objectively, to compare it to other similar games, and really try to see if the game's actually that busted. And for that, we're going to rely on Eurogamer's Digital Foundry.
Yeah, they recently analyzed Cyberpunk's performance on the 1.2 patch, finding that the PS4 Pro now maintains a solid 30 FPS, while the base PS4 has gained a few frames per second here and there, settling into the mid to high 20s.
And there is a trade-off for that. Assets now load into the scene slower, so more pop in. Also, the game still crashed once during testing on both the PS4 Pro and the base PS4.
Oh, man. Crashing is still no good. Performance-wise, though, PS4 Pro sounds just fine, while base PS4 is improving. You really can't excuse the crashes, though.
Yeah, unfortunately, the tester didn't say the length of the time the game ran stably, so it's hard to get an idea about how severe the crashing issue still is.
Amusingly, the game's frame rate still dips into the high teens on the original Xbox One.
Holy moly, yeah. The Xbox One is worse, and it's still available on that platform, so who knows, but boy, the Xbox One, huh? What won't you ruin?
We're not trying to make the case that Cyberpunk 2077 is just fine on the older consoles, but is it so bad that people shouldn't be allowed to buy the game?
Who knows? Cyberpunk's 1.2 performance doesn't really stand out that much if you compare it to other open world games on the base PS4.
Take Red Dead Redemption 2. It runs in the mid to high 20s in terms of FPS, with some cutscenes going even lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, by the math of it, that's where Cyberpunk 2077 is right now on the base PS4, give or take a few frames per second. Now, granted, crashing is another story entirely. I don't think Red Dead 2 crashed a bunch.
PlayStation also didn't have much of an issue selling Assassin's Creed Unity back in 2014. The game performed terribly at launch, crashed all the time, and was the butt of jokes for at least a year. One of my favorites of all time, Mr. No Face.
Even more recently than that, because that was a long time ago, and even that was not a great look for Ubisoft or anybody, but the game still stayed. It didn't get yanked from the world. But more recently, the 13 remake launched with horrible performance, just outrageous frame tearing and crashing, and it's still on the store.
So what's the deal? Cyberpunk 2077 really so much worse than all of these other games? The frame rates imply it's not that far off the mark, even if it's not ideal.
I've heard a lot of first-hand accounts that, even at launch at 1.0, the game would crash every other hour or so. That's a lot, but But the same people would even say, the game loads really fast and it saves all the time. So even when it crashes, I'm out of the game for like 3 minutes and then I just go back to it. So it was annoying and it was stupid and it shouldn't have happened, but it really wasn't the hugest deal.
Well, then again, people have insisted that the game crashes every few minutes and it is literally unplayable, which doesn't feel right to me looking at gameplay capture. But who am I to tell somebody their game isn't crashing? Obviously, the game is crashing.
Maybe it still crashes way too much, and that's just it. Maybe Sony has a crash threshold that the game hasn't crossed, and there it is. You can only have X percentage of crashes over 10 hours, whatever. So yeah, maybe it's just a graph that it's got to get above, and we're just waiting for that moment.
Boy, you'd think that would have been part of the game's approval process at the very beginning. They're the ones that said okay to the game in the first place. So did Microsoft. It's still up on their store just fine, and the FPS is even lower on the Xbox One.
Something seems fishy about all this. It's like this game has different rules than everyone else. It's kind of feeling like.
If we accept that Cyberpunk 2077 is not orders of magnitude worse than anything on the store, then there has to be another reason. And the biggest factor separating Cyberpunk 2077 from all these other games is CD Projekt's Refund program.
I mean, there is that. There is also just the game's notoriety. You can't really talk about it without that. It's worth bringing up. It's not like tens of thousands of people are excited for the 13 remake. So that game being bad isn't the cultural phenomenon that Cyberpunk was. Because it was, the hype for that game was a full-on cultural force.
Could be it. Sony did say they pulled the game, quote, to ensure a high level of customer satisfaction, maybe because there were so many customers for Cyberpunk. People are mad, so they did something to satisfy them. Maybe when people are not mad anymore, they'll bring it back, and it's just that simple.
Yeah, but we have a way cattier and sassier probability. This is some dramatic tabloid shit, so get ready.
Remember that CDPR announced they would offer refunds before Sony announced or acknowledged anything.
Yeah, at the time, this seemed like a hasty sort of knee-jerk, unprofessional move. People made fun of CDPR for it, like, oh, you amateurs, you can't release a good game, and now you're just doing whatever. So disruptions and confusion in the refund process also certainly implied it was a spur-of-the-moment decision versus something that was planned and organized and communicated.
Yeah, but CDPR might have done it that way on purpose, knowing that if they tried to negotiate a specific refund program with Sony would just tell them no.
So by announcing it to the world, they turned to the room and said, guess what Sony's going to do? They forced Sony's hand. They made them do it, which is kind of gangster, really.
So what is Sony going to do after that? I mean, you don't go to the world and say, hey, I know they said they'd give you refunds, but we're not going to do it. Sorry.
You'd instantly become the bad guy in a situation where everyone's real pissed off. And the bad guy is not you, it's that person. So you wouldn't want to take all that heat on yourself. So that's when you just shrug and back away. You absorb into the shrubs and then you start sharpening your knives.
Everyone loves bagging on CDPR. I know I've seen that over and over, and I'm still seeing it actually. We can understand why, but what if they're actually the Severus Snape of this situation, trashing their professional relationship with Sony to force them to offer refunds just to make it right with the people that bought the game and weren't happy? I can tell you what, right now, I'm saying that out loud, and I know everybody in the comments is going, that's absurd.
Anyway, it's pretty clear, I think, Sony doesn't really like being pushed around. Nobody does. By withholding the game now, it seems like they're making a statement to their business partners. You don't force Sony's hand or you're going to see the backside of it.
It's awfully sinister to think of it that way. But Sony has been throwing their weight around recently. They really have. We've been reporting on it.
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of weeks. Just to recap some of those, thanks to evidence presented in the Apple v. Epic case, we learned about a revenue sharing program that Sony required Epic to sign just to enable cross-play on the PlayStation platform for Fortnite.
They're also named in a class action lawsuit for curating a digital monopoly and manipulating digital game prices, which they absolutely did. Both stories we reported on the last few weeks.
Yeah, it's not hard to see a little hardball in Sony's game these days. And in context, it makes sense that they really, really resented another company compelling them to shell out monies on refunds and make special exceptions to their refund programs.
Yep, so they just delisted the game in retaliation, and now they're letting CDPR twist in the wind because they can. They've got that digital monopoly.
Ooh, now that's sassy.
Who knows? Maybe Sony Store can issue refunds for a game and then they relist it for sale. Like there's some kind of database conflict. The person that wrote the system is now a chicken farmer in Costa Rica. Dumber things have happened. We're not sure.
Yeah, it's so easy to sit back and make up all these tales of intrigue, treating corporations like Greek gods with petty feelings, but sometimes it might just be that the server room is locked and no one can find the key. Sometimes it is that dumb. So I don't want to make, anyone out to be a villain when we're just kind of speculating in the void.
Whatever the reason for it, CDPR can take a backhand from Sony like a champ at the moment.
Yeah, their investor relations social account announced that the game, Cyberpunk, has sold 13.7 million units in 2020. And that's without being listed on the PlayStation Store.
They had record revenues in 2020 and announced they would start working on multiple AAA games at once starting in 2022.
Yeah, that's not what happens to a company that's starving for another platform to sell their game on. So I think they're doing just fine in terms of revenue. And to them, I think getting relisted is a bonus at this point, especially once they relist the current gen versions of the game this fall with the next gen updates. They're just going to have another dip on that sales cycle.
It's weird because I think we all assume relisting has to happen by then, and it seems CDPR is just going to have to wait it out in the penalty box until then.
So that's what's going to get real spicy. If Sony refuses to list the game even when the next gen version is out, that's when it's just outright punitive.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right, because at that point, I mean, unless the game is broken again, we can assume the next gen versions are going to be working, right?
One would hope. I mean, yeah. Hopefully all the like technical problems that plagued the last gens just won't be there anymore. Ideally, and this is my hope, is that the rest of the world will get to play the version of the game that you and I got to play on PC.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Then maybe people can actually like talk about the game instead of, glitches. And glitches are fun, but yeah, who knows? If you still can't buy it digitally on PlayStation this fall, that'd be wild.
That's look, I'll say it. That's pretty clearly punitive. That's pretty clearly somebody's got like a fucking bone to pick with CDPR, and they're gonna be like, no.
I guess we'll see. Yeah, I don't know. What do you in the audience think? Do you think our takes are outrageous or stupid? Think we're just shilling? Want us to shut up about Cyberpunk? Let us know. I should have teed up more positive things. How right do you think we are on a scale from 9 to 10? How right?
God, just put a 9 or a 10 in the comments. Just let us know. If you like the show and you want it to grow, consider recommending us to a friend or supporting on Patreon. We got a little Patreon too.
Either one. We got a little family. It's growing here. But most importantly, hey, stay gaming.